welcome everyone. Again, this is the Know Your Farmer, Indigenous Farmer Making Connections with Local Producers panel. I'm Chelsea. I'm going to be moderating today. We have our panelists here who are going to introduce themselves shortly. Um, these panelists here are really the people that lead with their heart and put community and relationship at the forefront of their work in Indigenous food sovereignty and food justice work. So I want to really thank them all so much for being here and being a part of this panel and sharing with you all here today. So this panel will share some insights into traditional Indigenous food systems, the challenges and successes that farmers face, and how these systems promote health and cultural preservation for future generations. There will be time at the end for Q&A. And let's go ahead and get started with brief introductions and a fun little question. What is your favorite traditional food to grow or harvest? And then we'll just kind of start with Colleen and then pass the mic down.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen. I didn't to cheating but not kind of a chain to behind the shade or to the genie, the Chanel, little inside Nasha. So the Lahan social yet, a Hojiana gay yet the Bebetson.
Good morning, everybody. Yate bene goatsi hato. My name is Amber Lansing. I am the one of the co-founders for the Four Corners Food Coalition. I am also the executive director for the Dolores Family Project and Dolores Community Garden. I come from the Acoma, Navajo, and Shawnee tribes, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Yate, Shay nut or the net touchy, Shlento, Tutso, Bashichin, Twitching that Shado, Kittlechin National, Shachine, Topaha, I see Jitlejin de Nasha, Kuta Billashla Ishla, Yinishahagi, Brandon William Francis. I'm an alumni of Fort Lewis. I'm currently a research lab manager at the NMSU Ag Science Center in Farmington, and I live and plant with my family in the San Juan River, along the San Juan River in Farmington area. So, yeah, it's good to be here. And my favorite snack would have to be which we had in abundance of this year is pinons. So, thank you.
At a she Zachary Ben in Ishia, Ye Dana and Ashla, as they touch any bushes chin, Kitlachini dashed she Ashin, Dashanala. So, Yat Eshma. Akwatadana and Ashla. I was born and raised in Shiprock, New Mexico. I am a sixth-generation farmer from that area. And currently the owner and co-founder of Biddy Baby Foods and the co-founder of the Ben Initiative. And so what we do is we specialize in producing traditional baby food. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us here. First off, appreciate it. Carlos Baca. I'm from Southern Ute and also Dana. From just over the hill in Ignacio. I have a lot of things I do. I'm one of the co-founders of the I Collective, which is an international Indigenous food sovereignty group. One of the co-founders of the Four Corners Food Coalition. Have Fourth World Farm over in Mancus. And food, my whole livelihood, just so everybody that doesn't know me, is traditional food work. And so foraging, it's a tough question. Probably yucca fruits.
Yucca fruits. Colleen, do you want to talk about your favorite food to grow or harvest really quick?
It's going to be a long story.
A long list.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay me a little bit more. No, my connection to food, we all need food. I come from a pastoral family from the Black Mesa region. So I was raised, I'm around livestock all my life, and I still continue to care for them. So we've always been called upon for the produce that we've collected, we've traded, we've sold, we've gotten them into various different venues, from restaurants to events. We've shipped them throughout United States, you know, a lot of different things. And then, of course, these animals are also, we raise them for other purposes too. So we have the leather, we've done the wool, we've done the traditional weaving, we've done the commercial part of it. So that has led me to a lot of different things. And it still is like that for me. And as a result, it's leading into more of finding a way to still carry that. And it brings me into like even this venue that we have here today. So it's something that can actually uh, be purposeful in a lot of ways, just being raised traditionally like the way I was raised.
Thanks, Colleen. So yeah, Colleen had kind of started us off with our first question. So Amber, if you could pass the mic to Amber and talk to us a little bit about how do traditional indigenous food systems and farming practices in our region promote both cultural preservation and nutritional health.
Um, so I run the ISA program for the Four Corners Food Coalition. I've developed it with Carlos over the past year. And in doing so, working in traditional indigenous food systems, the main focus is cultural preservation and nutritional health within traditional foods. They kind of go hand in hand with each other. And well, part of the US or the ISA program is, what it is an indigenous shared agriculture program. It was modeled after the CSA program, which is a community supported agriculture program. The difference between the CSAs and the ISAs is CSAs are supported by communities. They buy into a farmer's produce before they're even grown, and it helps boost the farmer's growth for the season. With the indigenous shared agriculture, nobody is purchasing into our program as indigenous folks. We were brought up in communities where everything is shared. We have communal spaces that are shared with each other and food that's shared within each other. And so it's modeled after basically our own ways. With doing that, in order to keep in line with the idea of having cultural preservation, we look for farmers that do the same thing. Farmers that keep their traditional ways with farming and harvesting and distributing food. So I think a big part of that is centered around cultural preservation. I just wanted to mention too that every single person up here on this panel has helped me develop into who I am today. So it's an honor to be up here with everybody. And I appreciate everybody's insight into what it truly means to grow and distribute traditional foods. And I guess it's
Yeah, does anybody else on any of the panels want to add to that question of how cultural, both how do indigenous food systems and farming practices in our region promote both cultural preservation and nutritional health? We can probably ask one of the other panelists.
I think this started out with the birth of our son, my wife and I's son, and understanding that there was no access to traditional baby food. And so what do we do as parents to provide that type of environment for our child to grow up in and to thrive with? And that was, starting our own cornfield, heading back into the roots of the TEK, that technical ecological knowledge that, the land was yearning for us to tap into. And once we realized that connection, then we were able to birth our son in a Hogan setting. And then from there, our daughter on the cornfield, um, while they were able to gain that knowledge of having the farm next to us, understanding that relationship between, Nahastan, Yadilkit, Tko, and being able to ritualize that process and then feed our communities with that ritualization and heal together in that aspect. And so that was how we were able to use those physical components of what we produce, the nutritional side, and the spiritual parts of it in order to heal and bring nutritional wealth back into our communities.
Thank you, Zach, for touching on that. Brandon, the next question I have towards you. So let's talk about some of the barriers and challenges. Barriers and successes in increasing access to culturally relevant foods within local communities. Could you share some of those successes and challenges you've encountered in this area?
One thing I forgot to mention was not only that am I an alumni from Fort Lewis, but I went through the ag program up at the Old Fort as an apprentice, as an intern, and then as a fit, and then as an incubator farmer, and eventually going out and farming on my own. But growing up from a young boy from Black Mesa, Arizona, we grew up what's called dry farming, which is a distinction from dryland farming, which lacks irrigation. So all my modern agricultural training I received here at the Old Fort, and I was very blessed. I tell people to go not only school here, but to learn where our ancestors farmed and made traditional use of. And so I was able to take that knowledge I learned here at the Old Fort and as well as the traditional ecological knowledge Zach mentioned, as well as the indigenous agricultural knowledge. Um, these are all keywords, students, if you want to type it in your lit review, looking for terminology. I was able to take that to my new job at NMSU, which is over 10 years ago. I can't believe it. As I got a little note popped up and said, "You've been working for NMSU for 10 years now." And I was like, "Oh, time flies." And but coming from a dry farming perspective, it gave me a unique perspective on the farming that's done in this region, in particular in the San Juan River Valley, that we are blessed with so much water. And but then the soft infrastructure that gets people access to water is old and dilapidated and needs to be improved. And that's some of the ways that young farmers like Zach are helping people in the area learn to make use of what their ancestors did. And we often take that for granted, the knowledge of our ancestors. And I always tell my kids and tell high school kids that our ancestors, they had PhDs, they had masters in the environment. They knew when to plant. They knew the stars. They knew name all the plants in their environment. But us, we in the 21st century, we've become disconnected with that. And part of my job at the Science Center I feel is to reconnect not only indigenous people but all people with the land, and that because people have to eat, and by 2050 we're going to be feeding almost 1 billion more people, and with less land, less water, and the Four Corners is a good example of what the rest of the world's going to be facing in terms of climate change and in terms of access to water and access to land for farmers. So all those challenges are being faced by farmers in the Four Corners and by indigenous people. So not only are they trying to get access to culturally relevant food, they also want to make sure that the food, the medium that they grow in, the soil they grow in, the water they grow with is actually healthy and for their plants, for their animals, for their ceremonies. And so all these things are that we don't take in consideration. Indigenous people have been taken into consideration for thousands of years. So there's a lot of problems and challenges, but people like Zach, Carlos, and Amber, and Colleen, who's my sister from Black Mesa, um, are on the front lines of facing these problems. And indigenous people have always been on the front lines of whatever change is coming. So I feel that challenges are always met by the right opposite force. So if you're looking for something to do in your communities, um, help your communities, because one of the statistics I found at that Fort Lewis students always, especially Indigenous students, they surveyed them when I was in school, and they said 90% of the Indigenous students said that they would want to go back and help their communities. So not only are Indigenous students on the front lines of education, but they're doing that for their communities, for their families. So you're all doing very sacred and holy work when you're going out there for your community and taking back that knowledge and helping them meet challenges. And everybody has to eat. And agriculture is one of those fields that transcends all barriers, imaginary ones like borders, like nationalities, languages, food, and feeding people. Navajo people always knew that that was a sacred and holy profession. So people who are getting people access to food, they're helping carry on the ways of their ancestors. That feeding people and growing things is very sacred. So, and the challenges that we're facing are new in the 21st century, but they're not new to our ancestors, like climate change. Mega drought is nothing new. Mega drought is a terminology of a droughts that's been going on for more than 20 years. And our ancestors faced 50-year droughts, 70-year droughts. And it's in our genetics and it's our way of life that we can be able to push on beyond these things, because it's in our genes. Not only is trauma in our genes, but also the strength to overcome all these things, to be adaptable and confront those problems. So, and when I first started working in New Mexico, my wife she's into statistics and she's into learning about places. She found that New Mexico was the poorest state in the United States. And at that time, San Juan County was the poorest county in the United States and had the education levels and everything to show it for it. But that's where you want to be. That's where you want to go. And as Indigenous people and as Navajo people especially, we want to be those people who confront those things that our people are facing. So the challenges are new. We face lack of water, less soil, transition from old farmers to new farmers, and the heat. And I can probably talk on that later, but those are new phenomenon. We're dealing with dark respiration for you, those biologists. So probably going on and sucking up all the air.
All good, all good, Brandon. All right, Carlos, do you want to add to that? Because you're here in this region, you live and work in this area, and speak to kind of this area too.
Yeah. I've been doing like solely indigenous food sovereignty work for over 15 years. I started with a program at Southern Youth Cultural Center Museum called Taste of Native Cuisine, which was about how do we integrate traditional foods back into the system, right? And I learned quickly that just because you want to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? Just because you have a vision, if the community is not buying into it, it's not really a thing. And so when I speak a lot, I offer this up with, the effects of colonization on indigeneity as a whole, but in this region specific, is we have people in our communities that can go hungry on land that's provided for them for tens of thousands of years. So that's the disconnect for us. Like, that's how far removed we are from what we are. Right? Indigeneity, like the word indigenous, just specific, means that I know every plant on the side of that hill, every dirt type, every medicine use, food use, utilitarian use, right? I know the names for all of them in our language. We know all these things. That's what indigenous is. And that's been so separated from us that we have these conversations right here. You have this panel of folks and people like Chelsea and other individuals in this room that are coming back around to that, into that circle, right? So at points where I was speaking on 15 years ago with the tribe, nobody wanted to hear, is finally come back around, right? Um, to like amazingly, actually. Um, and so like the educational piece of those of us that maintain some of that knowledge, some of our, like for me personally, my grandparents, we talk about like agriculture. You guys talk about like sedentary farming. You talk about like pastoral life ways, whereas in the Ute way, it's really different. We had where my people are from is on actually on the other side of the Continental Divide, between like Abiquiu, Taos area up in there. Um, and there were some Ute folks that did farm in there that were married into the Pueblos, but for the most part, there's not really a scientific terminology for this, but a concept that I call cultivation in motion, which is actually the motion of the ecology, moving the ecosystem with you as you travel, right? And so there's places in this region from Bears Ears to here to Mesa Verde, all the way up in here, where I can show you the actual ecosystems that we built out, right? Um, my grandparents, my grandfather in particular, still maintained some of those ways and taught me how to continue that work. And so, with that information and continuing to build on that, um, we started seeing success where we do Indigenous foods with Cooking Matters programs. We do massive amounts of classes, uh, traditional foods classes where we end up with, and medicine, you know, with kids, like 50, 60 kids on buses up in the mountains doing this kind of work, and like getting and getting to hear what it sounds like to have 60 Dene youth singing on a sacred mountain, and things that haven't been heard, you know, things that have been gone for so long. So there's a million other things, but I don't want to run over.
You guys are on track. Yeah, so let's move into our next question, which is, and we'll hand the mic over to Zach. And so there are many programs that could, at various levels, that could help support farmers. Can you talk a little bit about what local, state, or national programs can help support Indigenous farmers and their work, Zach, to start us off?
Yeah, I guess sharing our journey as an entrepreneur, um, and as a small farmer, you know, some of those markets look like, well, I guess those systems was in the farmers market, the local farmers market, Durango flea market here, and that's kind of just how we started, doing a lot of cash itinerant sales, you know, person to person sales, and then from there, you know, getting a lot of feedback in, getting a lot of recommendations in, and so we're based out of the state of New Mexico, and so we wanted to have a bigger impact. And we wanted to shift on over into um, the demographic that we want to feed, and that was 0 to 5 year old children is what we wanted to prioritize. And so, in order to target that demographic, we needed to, you know, go where they eat, and that was SNAP, WIC, EBT, and then from there, food banks across the state of New Mexico. And so, in order to take that step into institutional sales and marketing, we required a ton of certifications. Um, and so um, we were reluctant to have the full support of the state of New Mexico, where they have legislation for universal healthy school meals. And so through that bill, it has allowed us to be able to get a USDA rep onto the farm, go through your farm risk assessment, farm certification, food handling, farm mapping. And those are all like the major first steps into certification. And so once we got all that established, they held in-person trainings that were free to us small and medium scale producers. And then from there, we were able to become farm to school certified, and then started working with local. And now we wanted to, you know, package. And so what does that look like? And so you have to go through a commercial kitchen. So on the Navajo Nation itself, there is no publicly accessible commercial kitchen throughout the whole Navajo Nation. So for us, we had to rely on border town infrastructure. So we went on to the Gallup Food Pantry, where they have a commercial kitchen that's certified by the state of New Mexico, dry and cold food storage. And then from there, we're able to store our product and manufacturing it within the same building. Got our food manufacturing through the state of New Mexico. And then from there, we're able to now distribute out of that hub across. We've served the Good Food Collective. We've served the Four Corners Food Coalition. Grubhub was one of our vendors as well here at Fort Lewis. And so, those are the steps that it took for us to be able to reach our target demographic and make sure our children and our families across states are able to have access to that healthy traditional food. And so another huge component to that was nutritional facts, right? In order to get healthy food into an area, you need to read the labels. What does that black and white look like, and how can we get it onto our packaging? So we worked and contracted with closely Tumbleweed Nutrition, who has helped us in that area. As a registered dietitian, she was able to get our nutritional analytics down. And then from there, recipe development, working in cooperation with that, partnering on local community events there on and off the farm. And from there, a really good grand example of that was serving Farmington Municipal School District for their Native Heritage Month. And so one season, we were able to serve over 2,000 servings of blue corn mush and nishiji, the Navajo dry steamed corn cereal, across the district from pre-K to high school. And we accomplished that with the help of having that registered dietitian at our side. And so those were some of the major steps that we were able to take, and being able to make an impact. And most importantly, making sure our children are not yearning for traditional cultural foods and that they have access to it, and normalizing that access. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right. Carlos, do you want to add to that a little bit about what state and local, national programs can help support Indigenous farmers and their work?
I have to speak like regionally, it's like the whole concept of state and border and all that, and Indian countries just kind of doesn't work because Indian country bleeds out of that. As far as native, let's say TNAFA, which is the Traditional Native American Food Association, they have a summer intern program that's pretty amazing. They've produced a lot of young native farmers in this region and outside of that. The Hopi Tutskwa Permaculture Center at Kaikot Village at Hopi. They also have programs that are similar to that. Who else? Beatty. They have a farmer internship program there. At Four Corners Food Coalition, we recently purchased a building. I'm working on an incubation kitchen that's based solely in farmers, value-added products kind of thing. And we also have a 4-acre farm that's attached to that has that same thing in mind. So we'll be having some interns. I do culinary internships and have in the past. But there's things out there, definitely.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
Number one for my suggestion would be always soil tests. And if you're growing in a mediumless as hydroponics or a raised bed, you don't need one. But if you're starting out, a soil test, and I would suggest a saturated paste extract. What I like to call the Cadillac of soil tests, because most soil tests they'll tell you all the nutrients that are in your soil, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. But what the saturated paste extract test will tell you, it's a $70 test. I would recommend it for new farmers. They'll tell you what the nutrients that are available when your soil is fully saturated with water, and that might be different and the nutrients that you get back from your basic soil test. There might be something blocking or inhibiting those nutrients from reaching your plant. So, and also starting small. Um, we have these big dreams where, oh, I'm gonna have acres and acres. You know, that's the fastest way to get discouraged. Learn about your plant. You know, failure is part of it, but giving up is not.
Cool. Thank you, Brennan. Let's go over and hand the mic back to Colleen. And we have some time, it's about like 15 minutes. So Colleen, the role of healthcare workers, nutrition educators, and students is important when it comes to promoting traditional and healthy foods. How do you think healthcare professionals and health educators can work with local farmers to help people access these foods?
I first of all, we're talking about the human being that whose health that you guys are trying to address, and most of them come to you either with some kind of a health related problem, and a lot of it is, in my thinking, for Native American population, you always hear about diabetes, you always hear about heart problems, and then there's another one that is not really talked about is where people are mentally. So that's where you want to become someone to help. And I'm going to kind of jump off topic here. I have learned this from the time that I was born to now, and I'm having it reaffirmed because I'm in a capacity of being a caregiver to my mother pretty much full time. So a lot of it is the mentality of these people that we all, with the mentality that we are approaching everything. You know, your drivenness to get an education, to get into the health field. And if you think this is something because it is needed, I want you to question yourself. Medicine is a new introduction to us here in America. We also understand that it's not the answer to everything, but the way the Creator has created us is to eat. But we are the same human population that has destroyed our food systems. We have created policies, barriers, and I have seen that. I have been through the federal court system trying to protect who I am indigenously, with foods to livestock. And so, and then there's the spiritual part. My lawsuit was for religious freedom. They never addressed that. So we're talking about the mentality, how a person looks at themselves, how they approach life really does have the physical effects of how a person goes through life. Doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, how old you are. We are meant to really live a really good life. So for my mom, I told her this morning, I'm taking up the extra rain for you. I'm going to go talk to our kids who are wanting to hear what we have known, is to accept our failures in this capacity as human beings as to what we do wrong to one another. So if you can understand where your shortcoming is, the science of medicine has made great amount of advances. You hear about people recovering and having ways to still continue throughout their life. Science and the medicines, I mean, they're so grand. It is needed because it does work. I also see that work also to approach to the food systems. I see it using to preserve the nutrition part. We're seeing it also being applied to the animals so we can consume the animals. We see it to the wildlife. Wildlife is also struggling, which was also a lot of our indigenous people had fish as their diet, and the game that we see out here, that is ours for us. and then of course the medicinal plants that grow throughout the region. So if you can understand, when it comes to us, we are everything that is around us, from our soil to our air and our water. Understand that. But as a person, if you're going to go in, the way I look at it is, because I have friends who are doctors. I have a cousin who's also a doctor. I have a lot of friends who are in the medical field. So here's what it is. You're going to learn what is being presented to you. It is up to you as to how you understand it. And the third part is what I call, in our way, we call it tinlay. In our world, in our culture, is like there's certain people that are meant to be healers. You are naturally gifted with that. The same thing as those people who actually have the ability to grow food or animals or have really healthy families. So you have to understand that when you're coming back to these people who understand the person. Just don't think that just because you have a degree that you are going to into the end point of being retired and voila, you can kick back and finally pay attention to your husband, finally pay attention to your child. It isn't that. So understand, when there's a human being before you, they are a living specimen. Don't incur, don't imply, don't do more harm from where they are at, if you can start from that standpoint. So that's how you can do that. How you can do that for the farmers and these people who have the access to have food to give to you is to make those connections. Relationships are really important. Relationships are very important. Learn how to relate. You don't have to talk to anybody. From your body language to the way you see yourself, and understand, no matter what becomes before you, you still are okay. So long as you wake up today, you may not be able-bodied today. What I'm learning about my mother is that, yeah, she's encumbered by her age and grace, but you know what I'm telling her is like, we're going to learn how to do this. We are inundated from accepting the fact that we age. And part of our growth is accepting those things. So I drew up that little map over there with the timeline way over there in the back. It shows myself in a cradle board with my family, and you see how that canyon kind of narrows, and we only have this tool of time. I'm gifting you this tool of time to share what I know of. So relationships are important, your relationship with yourself, and do your best as what you can do for the other person. And it starts with your family. Your family is going to be the hardest people that you have to heal. That's where you really need to start. This career, yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I have other careers too. They're wonderful. They're engaging. They're great. They're great, wonderful experiences. So if you can make that relationship, it's key. We're human. We're not perfect. We all have faults. We all have flaws. But we all eat. Some of us don't have access to the greatest, purest foods. Most of the world's food is tainted. So what we do have, what Indigenous people have here, is that we still have the technique of having to grow our own way. Some of us still hold on to lands that our families customary still have use of. Then there's those of us who also are going beyond the reservation boundary and still trying to keep those ways alive. We are here. It's just a matter of making those connections with people who are willing to do that. My job is basically to teach and to share what I have come to know, and that's what I feel that I need to fulfill.
Yeah, Colleen. Amber, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. So in making those connections with farm workers, I think it's also important to make connections with the traditional and Indigenous foods educators, because there's a big part of traditional foods that gets left out as far as understanding the traditional part of it. on the nutritional side, it's really important to make those connections for Indigenous people because of how healing traditional foods are to Indigenous bodies. Bringing back those foods into someone's diet opens up um, blood memory within their bodies, and their bodies recognize the foods that they're eating, the foods that have been missing for a long time, and understanding that connection by speaking with the traditional farmers and the Indigenous foods educators is really important, and it's a key that gets left out all the time. Um, Another part of it is understanding the cultural connection with the foods. And, you know, you could give somebody a dish and have them eat it, but helping them understand the cultural part of it and why it was taken out of our food systems, and helping heal those parts of the body that nobody talks about, the emotional parts of the body, are also very important. Understanding the um, the healing and the resistance that comes along with harvesting and using these foods, and it's important to make those connections with the knowledge holders that can that have their ways of teaching these things. I think that that part gets left out a lot. But I think a good part of our farmers are very knowledgeable about that stuff. We've gone to every single farm and learned so much about the foods that are grown and the reason why they're grown and how they're grown is also very important. Um, and healing that relationship that people have with food, you know, changing up a relationship that people have with food, that emotional connection that they have with food is also very important. um, and that's all.
Yeah, I think a first-hand experience with that at IHS was I was new dad, right? Going to a 6 month checkup. I was really proud of that. Taking my son in and alone too. So I was like really happy. I was like, yeah, I'm a dad now, and I'm taking my son into the 6 month checkup. I have all the questions down, and so we get in there. Nurse does their thing, temperature check, and all that good stuff, and then we get to the doctor, waiting for the doctor, and then she finally comes in, and then just you know, how is everything going? This, that. You know, going through the checklist there, and your son is eating solids now, I assume. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And this was where I was most excited, right? Because we're making our own baby food, and so I was like, yeah, our son is eating what we grow right there on the farm. And she looked up and she was like, what farm? And I was like, oh, well, we farm right here along the San Juan River, and this is the what we make, and this we're using heirloom seeds and organically. And she's like, oh, don't you know that the soil is tainted? Don't you know that it's full of uranium and waste and all that stuff? And you're feeding your child that? I was taken back, right? And so I immediately told myself that I am not the problem. You know, I know what I'm feeding my child. And, you know, we get our soil tests done, we get our water testing done, and I know that, you know, what we were providing for our child is clean and some of the best nutrition that he can receive. And so I was taken back, but in that moment, I told myself that, you know, I'm not the problem. And so with that, I was able to say that I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And I don't even know why I had to apologize, but I'm sorry that you're wrong. But, you know, we get our soil tested, we get our water tested, and this is what we're providing for our child. And she said, well, you know, I would, you know, go get something better. And I was like, wow, okay. So after that, our baby was exclusively breastfed, but she still went ahead and recommended some Enfamil for him, just in case. after that appointment. But I never picked up the prescription for that, knowing that again, our child is receiving the best from his mom, from myself as a farmer, and both of us combined is what we're providing for our child. So walking out of that experience, I told myself that we got to do better as parents to be able to, not have another family go through that experience that I just went through. And a year later, Bitty Baby Foods was given away for free at 6-month checkups. So that was a challenge at the same hospital, at the same pediatric ward. But again, that was a challenge. That was a little kick to the stomach, but that was a solution that we were able to provide as parents, as producers, as farmers, and being able to create a better environment for our children to thrive in.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Carlos, do you have anything to add to that? What are three speak? A couple more minutes.
Couple minutes.
Yeah.
I would just offer that, much to what Amber was saying, and actually getting to know who's doing the work, because there's a chunk of us out here that you put in the miles. You can look to Shining Mountain Health at Southern Ute, who've done their due diligence to bring me in year after year to do traditional foods classes. U Mountain used to do them there, not currently doing them. But I think that's the importance, right? As long as you know who's doing the work and you're building a relationship with that person and not just utilizing their knowledge. This is the most important, because I can't count how many people just assume I'm going to help them because without ever attempting to build any community, any relationship, or build anything out of it, right? So that's just my final offering. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
I'll be brief, I promise.
Okay. All right. Brandon's gonna be brief.
Speaking as an alumni, one of my biggest challenges and one of the biggest things I had to overcome coming to school was having to do group projects, working as a group. But one of the greatest gifts that Fort Lewis blessed me with was learning the power of community. And right now,
Brandon, can you speak into the mic a little bit more? Right there.
sorry, I have to start all over. I'm sorry. What I was mentioning was that one of the greatest things Fort Lewis blessed me with was I was one of those students where I didn't want to do a group project because I realized that either I was going to be the one doing 99% of the work and everyone else coming in the last. But I learned that we have to rely on our community. And Fort Lewis is a community, and it's also a bubble. And it's a protected bubble, protecting you so you guys can get the knowledge and the education to go back and help your communities, go back and help your people, go back and help your families. And my dad, I didn't understand him. He told me when I was very young. He said, it's not always what you know. Sometimes it's who you know. So those people you are going to school with, those people you are learning from, they're going to become the people who are going to help you in the future, and you're going to learn how to build those bridges to reach out to people like Carlos, like Zach, like Colleen, like Amber, and one of the things I was going to mention was Colleen also drew something, and I drew something, which is the brown one. Zach drew something. Did you do one of these, Amber? Oh, oh, I was gonna say, we are very visual people. So Colleen's is at the end, mine's in brown, and Zach's is the one that was just put back up. So, I just want to say thank you. And this is gonna be, Fort Lewis is a family, and you're gonna learn everything you learn here. You're gonna take it back to your communities and build a better community. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we got about 10 minutes of Q&A time. Do we got some questions in the audience? And then we have our mic person walking around. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Danae. She actually had put together an Indigenous food sovereignty and healthcare worksheet. So that should be in the chat. And then flip your one of the papers. Yeah, there's
Isn't that number 195 now? The number of federally recognized tribes? 195?
and for the Zoomies, that worksheet is to help you all just some suggestions, right? Education, partner with your Indigenous communities, use your voice in policy change, and then promote access to traditional foods. So thank you, Danae, for putting that together. Complements this panel nicely. Okay. Let me.
I have a microphone.
Okay. Awesome.
Just a super quick question for Brandon. What did you call the Cadillac of soil tests? What was that?
Saturated paste extract.
Well, sorry, one more time. I'm just not very familiar with the lingo. So
Saturated paste extract. Yeah.
This is just a question for all of you. What would be the best way for young Indigenous youth to educate themselves on Indigenous knowledge systems, and not just Indigenous Native youth, but maybe even non-Native people as well? Me specifically, I didn't grow up farming or doing anything like that, but I did ranching with my grandpa, so I have kind of a brief understanding of Indigenous knowledge systems. But I for myself would like to educate myself more. So what spaces or where can I look to educate myself? That way I can inform others of how to educate themselves on Indigenous knowledge systems.
Well, I would invite you to our farm there in Shiprock. It is open to everybody, so everybody is welcome to come and experience what we experience there. But with that, we have a nonprofit arm to what we do, and that's called the Ben Initiative. And so in that nonprofit, we have a farmer incubator program. It's a farmer in residence program, RES with REZ. And so with that, Kira, if you want to, sorry to put you on blast, but if you want to put your hand up, that's Kira. She's one of our farmer in residence from last year. So she joined us from Tulani Lake, Arizona. So she drove every other day out from there to be able to come onto the farm, see what we do. She started her own 2 acres or acre, and we helped support her through cooperative methods. So she had access to heavy equipment, the knowledge. We also brought in other experts in those areas to understand both culturally, spiritually, technically, how to navigate a tribal farm, basically starting with that. And then from there, you have a ability to where you can step up into, if you want to create your own brand. And so that's where Kira is at right now. And we've been supporting her all winter, and helping to write grants. What does that look like? That technical support in those areas to the TEK part of it. Go out and attend a ceremony, learn how to butcher traditionally, and build up your character in those areas as well. So that's what we offer. And I know, you got Carlos here too within the region, who also does something similar. So I'll let him speak to that.
Since he spoke to that, I'm gonna jump outside of that. I am the lead writer of a Indigenous cookbook project called A Gathering Basket, which looks at traditional Indigenous foodways through the lens of food warfare against indigenous food systems. It exists in an online platform. So as a student, if you email us as a student, we'll send you the link to all the issues free. Everyone else has to pay for it. But if you go to icollectiveinc.org, you can check our website out and see what that looks like. I think that platform is beautiful. People have always asked me when I'm going to write a cookbook. So I used to be a chef in a different lifetime, and I always said I would never do a cookbook because cookbook is about self, right? Like, I'm the chef, I do this, it's about me. And so the Gathering Basket project is about community. In 15 issues, there's over 70 indigenous voices. Some of that's art, some of that is poetry, some of that is visual. How do you break down a salmon or whitefish in the Midwest and stuff? But what it really does is it hands the mic on our platform over to people in their communities who are actually doing indigenous food sovereignty work, for them to tell their story, what my community went through, what the barriers are, and things like that. So I think that's an excellent tool. If you want to give that a look, you can just send us an email and we'll try to get you a copy of that. Outside of that, if you check out Four Corners Food Coalition, we do traditional food classes, and part of the ISA program, we actually do traditional food program or the classes along with the food pickup. So when we do distribution, if there's whatever the traditional product is that we're doing in there, we have a class about the history of it, about when to harvest, all these things, and it's not all just food. Sometimes it's medicine. I do classes all year, so you'll be able to find classes on our website as well for traditional foods.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to the opportunities?
I'll add one more.
Okay.
I have one more. Through the Four Corners Food Coalition, you could join our fellowship. We're right now in our second year. What we do is we get a cohort of fellows together and we visit different food systems in the region. We visited Bitty Baby Farms and we visit Brandon. That's another opportunity. I'm sure we'll do it again next year, but that consists of 10 days of either on-site visits to different farms or educational facilities and Zoom calls. So it's a mixture of both.
I'm going to answer your question about your disconnect from your connection for your indigenous lineage. And this is based on what I've seen in families and among my relatives. It takes one generation to lose language. It takes one generation to lose your connection spiritually. That's all it takes. So my paternal grandfather was a medicine man. Not a single one of his children picked up that bundle. On my mother's side, some of that medicine is carried on still. And then back to this food practices and to the faith and the teaching and all of it, you have to ask why. In my family, on my mom's side, I have cousins that are not full Dene. They're have the privilege to enroll in other tribes if they wanted to, but they don't speak it. They know very little. They don't know their family. Again, relations. So it's personal that you take this time. It's a perfect time to heal. While most of this country is in chaos, it's a perfect time to heal. Ask yourself why your parents didn't share something with you. It's a human decision. It's a choice. It's just like how my cousins chose not to teach their children to speak Dene. And a lot of times it's not really for a good reason. They think, I've heard this say among our Navajo people, go to school, you don't need to do this, go eat bologna and white bread. That's the easiest way, go get a job, you go get your truck, go get your middle, all of this other stuff. But they have lost connection to a lot of things, of a lot of knowledge from the land, everything they have. And yet I have other relatives that are yearning and wanting to learn a lot of things about our ways, our culture. And we have other people from other tribes wanting to learn our ways. Been around other people who have taught me their language and things like that to share. All I'm going to say is honor what it is that you want to know about yourself. There's protocol. Protocol is this: you go back to the actual DNA of family and relatives of who they are. It's mostly somebody else older than you who will tell you history, what their land connection was, what they do, because most families among American Indian tribes had a certain designated responsibility to carry. It was just not given to you. And don't hold your parents responsible for not giving it to you. As an adult, you forgive them, let it be, let it go. But if you want to fulfill that void, to be greater than that, to stand up for your people, your language, you can do it. It's doable. I say that based on the fact that I see non-natives come and speak the Dene language. They read it, they write it. They have websites up about our cultural ways. I have another career where I'm being asked to speak other tribal languages, and it's not their people standing up fulfilling those roles. This knowledge, if you are from that nation, from that group of people, that's probably the greatest honor you can do for yourself. Learning is the greatest skill that anybody can have. And don't take that from yourself. Just because somebody else didn't mean to give it to you, it doesn't mean it doesn't belong to you. You're meant to learn.
Thank you. Do we have time for another question? One question.
Could I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, go for it, Amber.
I just wanted to share my experience with you. I am not a farmer. I don't come from farmers. I don't have any family members close to me that grow food. But in the year 2021, I decided I was going to build a garden. And I approached my town and with my dream, and only a dream, that I wanted to build a garden. And I needed two things from them. I needed land and water. And as going in front of a town board and asking a big favor for land and water was a scary thing. But I drew up the courage. I went in front of them and I told them that I wanted to grow food for my community. And as I was doing this, in the process of building my garden, I added the traditional aspect to it with traditional foods and growing traditional foods within my garden, having never grown before. And just by talking with everybody on this panel and learning from them and understanding a lot of the reasons why I wanted to get back into it, understanding that reason for myself gave me the drive to build a very beautiful garden. I'm in my third year of the garden. The first year we built, the second year was we produced 195 pounds of food. And then last year I produced 267 pounds of food. So it's growing as I go. And I always tell people I learn as I grow by asking questions. I'm sure everybody gets tired of all of the questions that I ask that seem like common sense, but they're not. You know, no question is too far from reach. You know, you could always get your answers from somebody, and don't be afraid to step into that realm. Don't be afraid to get your hands in the dirt, literally, and do what you want to do. And it could start small too. You could start with a garden. It doesn't always have to be a huge farm or anything, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
We have someone.
Thank you, everybody, for your answers. I really appreciate it. My name is Regina, and I'm from Sage Memorial Hospital. I did appreciate the question that was addressing the local farmers and healthcare link. So I kind of wanted to go back to that. And it was mentioned by Zachary that you were able to get some of your product into the hospitals. So going off of that, I wanted to know, how long did that take? What was the biggest challenge in providing the product? And if you could just briefly, maybe 30 seconds, discuss the process of how to go about that.
Yeah. So what we did strategically was get with the higher ups that ran the pediatric ward, and this was just our own, introduction into that, because again, we wanted to set that change, and so um, one of the other um, nurses in the area, she ended up getting a grant, writing her own grant and getting it, and so that way she could purchase that from us directly. And then after that, we then met her with what she was spending, and then that's how we were able to donate / they were able to purchase some, and understanding that it was going to the pediatric ward, and that was going to be and that's where we strategically said, like, okay, every 6 month checkup, because that's when babies are starting to eat or being introduced to solid foods. And so that's how we were able to collaborate, strategize, get some funding rolling together, and then, went halfsies on it to be able to get that to our families quickly. Yeah. But yeah, it took a year.
All right. So no more questions. Cool. Oh, we have another one. 5 minutes. All right.
Sorry. Thank you so much. My name is Bridget, and I work on the Cooking Matters program for Nourish Colorado. I, some years back, was on the Southwest Food Coalition. I was around when the Four Corners Food Coalition was created. And I guess this question is for everybody, but I might immediately address Carlos because I'm familiar with your experience. I know that you are involved in the nutrition and cooking classes that are taking you place in the Southern Ute Indian tribe, and we used to have classes that took place within Ute Mountain Ute, and those discontinued after the pandemic happened. Those were partners that I supported, many, many years ago. This has been mentioned by some panelists, lack of, trust. And I think historically there's been obviously trust broken between tribal nations and the government and much more beyond that. So my question is this: is just any advice that you might give for somebody who is individually and on behalf of my organization trying to reach out and rebuild these relationships to continue to provide support and funding to different tribes and communities that would like to possibly continue to do these educational classes?
Yeah, I have to point out like the depth of what that looks like in this region, because being most organizations sit on border town within border towns. Um, I'd say it's almost 100% of people that write grants write the tribes in. Not with our permission, not with anything, but because you might serve an indigenous person, right? So that history in and of itself, and the fact that we know that, right? And that people are getting massive amounts of money that aren't going to work with our community, that don't have community connections, who haven't built trust, who haven't built anything with us, right? And this has been going on for decades and decades and decades, right? And it happens now. There's food organizations right here with people in the room who've done that, who've written Four Corners Food Coalition into their stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like it's hard for people to rebuild that because it just is a never-ending cycle. On an individual level is the only place to really start, in my opinion. Like see what we're doing, come to the place, actually participate, and know that we don't owe you that, right? I don't owe you instant gratification. I'm not going to invite you in instantaneously. I've been doing this work for, like I said, ages now. I work with tribes across the continent, from Akwesasne to Layla to Mixtec in Oaxaca, like that big of a spectrum, right? And I've been allowed to do that and been invited to those communities because of the time I've put in. And that's as another indigenous person, right? So somebody outside of that spectrum is a whole nother conversation. So, but that's my advice, is really just, you have to put in the work and don't expect that it's going to happen instantaneously.
All right.
Yeah, definitely
Ooh.
that. And, just hit up our website as well at bittybabyfoods.org. And then, shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to either answer more questions. I know there'll be some questions. We're happy to provide guidance for young ones that are starting that agricultural path or simply public health data. So, we're happy to answer all of that. So head over to our website. We all have some websites. I'm sure everybody's gonna give a shout out real quickly, but just do go from there, and then we can continue emailing, I guess. Yeah.
And I wanted to
So, thank you.
mention that Zach will actually be at the roundtable discussion tomorrow. We have Gretchen from Four Corners Food Coalition in Nourish, Colorado, Eric White. So for our lunch and learn opportunity tomorrow, it'll be a roundtable discussion. So you can definitely connect with these folks up here. But let's give a round of applause for our speakers. I want to say thank you all so much for being here and sharing sharing about being a farmer in this region, Four Corners area. Yeah.